In-law threats. Full episode, Doctor. Phil, when you enter a marriage, you're not just committing to a partner. You're stepping into an extended family with its own dynamics, values, and expectations. But that does not mean anyone, not even your in-laws, have the right to overstep boundaries that protect your home, your emotional safety, or your relationship. Boundaries aren't suggestions, they are necessities. Without them, relationships crumble under the weight of intrusion and disrespect. The foundation of any healthy family connection, especially with in-laws, is built on clearly communicated limits that both sides agree to honor. Fear should never have a seat at your dinner table. If you find yourself walking on eggshells around your in-laws, dreading every interaction, or feeling intimidated in your own home, that's not just a family issue, that's a threat to your well-being. No one should have to endure emotional or verbal threats disguised as concern or involvement. Family is supposed to offer safety, not provoke anxiety. When fear enters the picture, something has already gone seriously wrong, and pretending it's normal only allows the problem to grow. One of the most dangerous things people do in toxic family situations is stay silent to avoid confrontation. They convince themselves that silence is the mature thing, the peaceful thing. But peace that comes from silence in the face of injustice is not peace, it's compliance. When you don't speak up, you empower the behavior. You may think you're avoiding conflict, but you're only postponing a bigger one down the road. The longer you remain quiet, the louder the disrespect becomes. Your spouse plays a central role in how the relationship with your in-laws evolves. If they stand by while their parents mistreat or threaten you, they are not neutral. They are enabling. Marriage demands loyalty, and that loyalty must be to the life you're building together, not just the people who raised you. Turning a blind eye to your partner's pain, just to avoid upsetting your own parents, is not strength. It's betrayal. Your partner should never feel alone in their own marriage. Any kind of threat, whether it's spoken or implied, whether it's physical or emotional, is abuse. Too often, people excuse toxic in-law behavior because of age, tradition, or culture. But abuse is abuse, no matter who delivers it. Emotional blackmail, manipulative guilt, and constant threats are tactics used to control, not love. They wear people down, destroy marriages, and turn homes into battlegrounds. Recognizing this behavior for what it is can be the first step in ending it. What's even more important is remembering that children are always watching. They're absorbing everything, even the things you think you're hiding. If they see one parent being disrespected or threatened while the other stays silent, they learn that this is acceptable. They grow up repeating the same patterns or accepting them in their own lives. The legacy of family dysfunction doesn't stop on its own. You have to decide where it ends. Sometimes the only way to find healing is to create distance. It's not about revenge or punishment. It's about preserving your peace and protecting your relationship. You can love people and still need space from them. You can wish someone well and still decide they don't belong in the middle of your marriage. Peace is not passive. It's something you must actively defend. You owe it to yourself, your spouse, and your children to draw the line and say, this stops here. Because in the end, a family should be a source of strength, not a source of threats. Fear is one of the most damaging forces that can exist within a family. When someone feels afraid to speak up, to voice their thoughts, or to simply be themselves around their in-laws, it creates an unhealthy and unstable environment. No one should feel like a prisoner in their own home, especially when that fear stems from individuals who are supposed to be part of a support system. Fear in a family dynamic doesn't just affect one person, it ripples outward, slowly poisoning communication, trust, and emotional safety for everyone involved. Living in fear can lead to emotional shutdown. The person on the receiving end of threats or intimidation may start to isolate themselves, avoid confrontation at all costs, or simply go through the motions to keep the peace. but keeping the peace at the expense of your well-being is not true peace. It is survival, and over time, that kind of emotional suppression builds resentment, anxiety, and even depression. Fear drives people into silence, and silence allows toxic behaviors to thrive without challenge. In some cases, fear doesn't just stay emotional, it can show up as physical tension. Your body stiffens when a certain person enters the room. You anticipate what's going to be said before it's even spoken. You start scripting conversations in your head, trying to predict every move so you don't end up in another confrontation. That's not a family relationship, that's a toxic power dynamic. And when fear becomes the default emotion in your interactions, love has no room to grow. Many people convince themselves that enduring this kind of fear is a sign of strength or maturity. They tell themselves that it's better to tolerate bad behavior than to cause family conflict, but this mindset allows toxicity to spread unchecked. The reality is that confronting inappropriate behavior, even when it's hard, is what true strength looks like. Fear is not a burden you should carry for the sake of keeping the family image intact. The longer you carry it, the heavier it gets. Children growing up in an environment where one parent lives in fear of in-laws can sense the tension, even if it's not spoken aloud. They learn that being afraid is a normal part of family life. They internalize the idea that silence equals safety, and they bring that belief into their adult relationships. This kind of legacy doesn't end with one generation unless someone makes the difficult choice to stop it. Fear doesn't just hurt the person feeling it, it teaches everyone watching that it's acceptable. Breaking free from fear requires courage. It means having tough conversations, setting firm boundaries, and sometimes stepping away from relationships that refuse to change. It also means asking for support from your spouse, from a therapist, from trusted friends, because no one should navigate this kind of pressure alone. Recognizing that fear exists is not weakness. Admitting that it hurts is not failure. It's the first step toward taking back control of your emotional space. No one deserves to live in fear, especially not within the place that should offer the most comfort. A family that truly cares will listen when you say you feel unsafe. A healthy relationship does not require fear to function. If you're in a situation where you're constantly on edge, constantly anticipating the next threat or insult, it's time to ask yourself what kind of life you're building, and whether you're willing to keep paying the price that fear demands. You deserve peace, and peace begins where fear ends. Silence often disguises itself as a solution in toxic family dynamics. People choose not to speak up because they believe avoiding confrontation will keep things calm. They tell themselves it's better to let things slide than to start a fight or disrupt the fragile balance within the family. But what many don't realize is that silence doesn't fix the problem, it feeds it. When you stay quiet in the face of disrespect, you're giving silent permission for that behavior to continue unchecked. When you avoid speaking out, you're not just protecting the peace, you're protecting the problem. You're giving toxic individuals the impression that what they're doing is acceptable. Every time you stay silent after a demeaning comment, a manipulative threat, or an invasive gesture, you're reinforcing the idea that they can act however they want without consequence. In that way, silence becomes its own form of communication. It says, "I'll tolerate this." And once you've said that enough times without words, it's incredibly difficult to take it back. Silence isn't just damaging to the situation, it's damaging to you. Holding in your frustration, sadness, and anxiety builds emotional tension over time. It creates stress, inner conflict, and a deep sense of helplessness. You begin to doubt your right to speak, your right to draw boundaries, and even your perception of the problem itself. You may start to question if it's really that bad or if you're just being too sensitive. This internal confusion keeps you stuck, unable to move forward or make healthy decisions for yourself. In toxic family environments, silence becomes a tool of survival. You stay quiet to avoid retaliation, to keep your spouse from being caught in the middle, or to avoid being labeled as dramatic or confrontational. But silence doesn't actually solve anything. It simply postpones the conflict and often makes it worse when it finally does explode. The longer you stay silent, the more power you give to the person creating the toxicity, and the more they will continue to push boundaries. Speaking up is not easy. It's often terrifying, especially when you're dealing with family dynamics where roles and expectations have been ingrained for years. But speaking up doesn't have to be a full-blown confrontation. It can begin with a calm but firm statement. It can start with writing down your thoughts to make sense of them before you talk. The important thing is that you start using your voice again, not to provoke, but to protect your own mental and emotional space. The idea that silence is maturity or politeness needs to be challenged. Real maturity is setting boundaries, not burying your discomfort to protect someone else's pride. True respect is built through honest communication, not through one-sided compliance. When you consistently silence yourself to avoid upsetting others, you're not building peace, you're building pressure, and eventually that pressure will find a way to escape, often in ways that are damaging to everyone involved. Choosing to break the silence doesn't mean you're being disrespectful. It means you're reclaiming your power. It means you're drawing a line and saying, "I matter too." Toxic behavior thrives in the shadows of silence, and the moment you bring it into the light, it starts to lose its grip. You don't need to scream, accuse, or shame. Just be honest, because the truth, spoken with strength and calm, has a way of disrupting even the most deeply rooted toxicity, and that disruption is often the first step toward healing. Silence is often mistaken for wisdom, especially in tense family situations. People assume that if they don't speak up, they're being mature, respectful, or even selfless. But in reality, silence in the face of toxic behavior doesn't solve anything. It simply allows that behavior to continue and even escalate. When someone mistreats you or crosses a line and you say nothing, they are more likely to feel entitled to do it again. Over time, that silence becomes a message that what they're doing is acceptable or at least tolerable. In many families, people stay silent out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of losing relationships. But fear-driven silence is not a solution, it's a trap. It keeps you stuck in patterns that are harmful to your well-being and gives the other person the power to continue operating without accountability. The longer you stay quiet, the more permission you're giving. And once you've allowed that pattern to settle, it becomes harder to break free from it. There's also the fear of being labeled as the problem. When you speak up in a family where silence is the norm, you're often seen as disruptive. You may be told you're overreacting, too sensitive, or causing unnecessary drama. These reactions are meant to shame you into staying silent, but being honest about your discomfort isn't the problem. The real issue is the behavior that made you uncomfortable in the first place. Calling attention to it is not disrespect, it's self-respect. Silence also impacts your inner world. You begin to internalize the pain instead of addressing it. The resentment builds slowly, often without you even realizing it. You may begin to feel distant from people you once trusted, bitter during family gatherings, or emotionally numb when conversations start. This emotional toll can quietly affect your health, your confidence, and your relationships with others who aren't even part of the conflict. Staying silent too long can also damage your relationship with your spouse or partner, especially if the issue involves their family. They may not fully understand how much the situation is affecting you if you haven't voiced it clearly. You might hope they'll just notice how uncomfortable you are, but unspoken pain is easy to miss. Without clear communication, misunderstandings grow, and that emotional distance can turn into real damage between two people who once felt deeply connected. Breaking that silence isn't about starting a fight or shaming anyone. It's about bringing truth into the conversation. It's about saying, "This is hurting me, and it can't keep happening." It doesn't have to be loud or aggressive. It just has to be honest. Speaking up opens the door to change. It gives you the chance to reset boundaries, to clarify expectations, and to begin healing, both personally and within the relationship. When someone is being mistreated by their in-laws and chooses not to speak up, that silence sends a message. It says the behavior is acceptable, or at least something they're willing to endure. Over time, that message becomes a pattern. The person on the receiving end of toxic behavior begins to feel like they don't have the right to complain, and the one causing harm begins to feel like they're entitled to act that way. This dynamic slowly becomes the norm, even though it chips away at trust and respect. Fear plays a major role in why people stay quiet. They might fear being blamed for causing conflict, or they might be afraid their spouse won't take their side. They might worry that speaking up will only make things worse. But the truth is, staying silent doesn't protect you. It protects the problem, and while confrontation may be uncomfortable, staying in a situation where your voice is constantly suppressed is far more damaging in the long run. Silence can also lead to resentment. The more someone bottles up their feelings, the heavier those feelings become. What starts as a few ignored comments or boundary violations can eventually turn into deep emotional pain. That pain doesn't just go away. It lingers, affecting how the person sees their relationship, their home, and even themselves. Resentment grows in silence, and once it takes root, it's hard to get rid of without honest and often difficult conversations. The impact of staying silent can spill into the marriage itself. If one partner is constantly being mistreated by their in-laws and the other isn't acknowledging it or stepping in, it creates a sense of betrayal. The affected partner might feel isolated or unsupported, even if their spouse believes they're trying to stay neutral. But neutrality in the face of harm isn't really neutral. It's passive acceptance. A strong marriage depends on mutual protection and loyalty, especially when external relationships become toxic. Speaking up doesn't mean shouting or being disrespectful. It means calmly but firmly stating your truth. It means setting boundaries and enforcing them with consistency. It means standing up for your dignity without tearing others down. This kind of communication opens the door for real change, even if it's uncomfortable at first. When you speak with clarity and intention, you give the relationship a chance to grow in a healthier direction, or to reveal whether it's capable of growth at all. Ultimately, silence in a toxic situation is a form of self-betrayal. You were not meant to live in fear of your own voice. You were not put here to constantly accommodate people who disregard your worth. Finding the courage to speak up is not about controlling others. It's about reclaiming control over your life and your peace of mind. The cost of silence is too high, and the freedom that comes from speaking your truth is worth every word it takes to get there. Threats are abuse, no matter how they are framed or who delivers them. Whether the threat is loud and aggressive or subtle and manipulative, it carries the same intention: to control, intimidate, and overpower. In family dynamics, particularly with in-laws, threats can be disguised as concern or advice, but their impact tells the real story. A threat does not have to be physical to be damaging. Emotional threats, such as withholding love, access to grandchildren, or financial support, are just as harmful and often more deeply rooted in long-term psychological control. When threats become a regular part of interactions, the relationship is no longer based on respect or love. It becomes rooted in fear. Living under the shadow of constant threats affects your ability to feel safe, express yourself freely, or make independent decisions. This kind of environment forces you into a state of emotional survival where every word and action is calculated to avoid conflict or backlash. You begin to lose touch with your sense of self as your energy is spent trying to manage someone else's behavior. What often makes these situations even more complicated is the fact that the person issuing the threats is someone close, like a parent, in-law, or sibling-in-law. Because of that closeness, many people struggle to even label the behavior as abusive. They tell themselves that it's just how the person is, that they mean well, or that family should always be forgiven. But abuse doesn't stop being abuse just because it comes from someone related to you. Recognizing it for what it is can be one of the most important and difficult steps in protecting yourself. Another layer of damage comes when your spouse or partner does not step in to stop the behavior. When someone is threatening you and the person you trust most chooses to remain silent, it adds another layer of hurt. It makes you feel abandoned, even betrayed. A healthy relationship requires both partners to stand up for each other, especially when the threat is coming from within the family. Ignoring abuse for the sake of avoiding awkward family tension is not a solution. It's a silent endorsement of the behavior. Often, people will rationalize threats by saying that the person making them is just stressed, didn't mean it, or was having a bad day. While empathy is important, making excuses for abusive behavior only ensures it will continue. There must be a clear line drawn between understanding someone's struggles and allowing them to cross boundaries that cause harm. When you excuse threats once, you teach the person that they can get away with it again, and each time it happens, the damage cuts a little deeper. Setting boundaries with people who use threats as a form of control is not easy, but it is necessary. It might involve difficult conversations, temporary distance, or even permanent disconnection in extreme cases. Your peace and safety must be non-negotiable. You can still love someone from afar. You can still respect the role they play in your family while refusing to allow their behavior to define your daily life. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors, and you get to choose who walks through them. At the end of the day, no one deserves to be threatened, manipulated, or emotionally controlled by anyone, especially not within their own family. Abuse wrapped in family loyalty is still abuse. It doesn't matter how long it's been happening or how many people have normalized it. You have the right to name it, reject it, and heal from it. Taking a stand against threats isn't about being disrespectful. It's about demanding respect for yourself. And that's not just healthy, it's necessary. Accountability is a two-way street. In any family dynamic, especially when tensions run high or threats are being made, it's important to remember that responsibility doesn't rest on just one side. It's not only about confronting the person making the threats, but also about recognizing where you may have allowed certain behaviors to continue by avoiding the discomfort of standing up for yourself. Holding others accountable starts with holding ourselves accountable for the standards we set and the boundaries we enforce. Too often, people believe that keeping quiet or taking the high road means they're being mature. But if that silence allows harm to continue, then it becomes complicity. Accountability means that if you recognize something as wrong, you must also recognize your role in addressing it. It doesn't mean you're at fault for someone else's actions, but it does mean you're responsible for how you choose to respond. Refusing to engage with harmful behavior isn't always the noble act people think it is. It can be a form of self-abandonment. Likewise, the person who is making threats must be held to the same standard. Family relationships are not exempt from the rules of basic human respect. Whether it's a parent, in-law, sibling, or extended relative, their role in the family does not entitle them to mistreat anyone. When someone crosses a line, they should be confronted respectfully but directly. Letting things slide out of fear or tradition creates a cycle where bad behavior is learned, repeated, and passed down. Spouses, in particular, have a unique responsibility when conflict arises between their partner and their own family. It's not enough to stay neutral or try to keep the peace by avoiding the issue. True accountability in a marriage means listening, validating your partner's experience, and taking a stand when necessary. If a partner feels unsafe or disrespected by your family and you do nothing, that sends a message that their pain doesn't matter. Standing up for your spouse doesn't mean rejecting your family. It means honoring your commitment to mutual respect and emotional safety. It's also important to recognize when accountability needs to be paired with forgiveness. Calling someone out isn't about punishing them, it's about making space for healing and growth. People can change, but only if they are willing to take responsibility for their actions and do the work to improve. Without accountability, there's no real opportunity for trust to be rebuilt. Forgiveness without accountability is empty. It only postpones future conflict rather than resolving it. When both sides accept responsibility, one for causing harm and the other for acknowledging where boundaries were not enforced, a real conversation can begin. That conversation can lead to change. It opens the door for mutual understanding, compromise, and rebuilding the relationship in a healthier way. But without that balance of accountability, the same patterns will continue, and the relationship will suffer under the weight of unresolved tension and resentment. In the end, accountability isn't about blame, it's about growth. It's about choosing honesty over comfort, responsibility over avoidance, and healing over hostility. It requires courage, humility, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it's through that discomfort that true progress is made. In any family, the path to peace isn't paved with silence and submission. It's built with accountability from both directions, one honest step at a time. Emotional blackmail is still blackmail. It might not involve physical force or legal threats, but the psychological manipulation behind it can be just as powerful and damaging. It often shows up in the form of guilt, tripping, silent treatment, conditional love, or veiled ultimatums. The goal is always the same: to control another person's behavior through fear, obligation, or shame. This kind of manipulation can be subtle, making it hard to identify at first, but its impact grows over time, slowly wearing down a person's sense of self and emotional security. In family dynamics, emotional blackmail is particularly dangerous because it hides behind the excuse of love. A parent might say, "After everything I've done for you," or a sibling might insist, "If you really cared about this family, you wouldn't act this way." These phrases aren't just statements, they're weapons. They are designed to make the other person feel guilty, selfish, or ungrateful, all so the manipulator can get what they want. And when repeated over time, these tactics can make a person doubt their own judgment, values, and worth. People on the receiving end of emotional blackmail often feel like they're walking on eggshells. They constantly second, guess their decisions, afraid of triggering another guilt trip or emotional meltdown. They learn to anticipate emotional outbursts and start making choices not based on what's right for them, but on what will keep the peace. This form of control might not leave physical scars, but it can deeply damage a person's mental health, self-esteem, and ability to form healthy relationships. What makes emotional blackmail so hard to confront is the fear of being labeled as ungrateful or disrespectful. When the manipulation comes from a parent, in-law, or other close family member, the emotional stakes feel even higher. Confronting the behavior often means challenging a relationship that's been important your whole life. But love should not be used as a tool for control. Real love does not punish, silence, or manipulate. It listens, respects, and allows space for disagreement without retaliation. Breaking free from emotional blackmail starts with recognizing it for what it is. It means calling out the behavior when it happens, even if you do so calmly and respectfully. Saying things like, "I'm not okay with being spoken to this way," or "that feels manipulative and I need to take a step back," are important acts of self-respect. You can't change the other person, but you can control your response. And setting that boundary is the first step toward reclaiming your power. It's also crucial to remind yourself that protecting your peace doesn't make you cruel or heartless. Many people have been conditioned to believe that standing up for themselves is an act of aggression, especially when the manipulator is someone close. But saying no, walking away from guilt, trips, or distancing yourself from toxic patterns is not selfish, it's survival. You deserve to live a life where your choices are made freely, not under pressure or fear of emotional punishment. Ultimately, emotional blackmail is a form of control that thrives in silence and confusion. The clearer you become about your boundaries, the harder it is for manipulation to work. It may cause tension at first, but the freedom and clarity that follow are worth the discomfort. You are not responsible for someone else's emotions when you're doing what's best for your well-being. And the moment you stop giving in to emotional blackmail, you begin to take back control of your own story. Healing might require distance even from those we once considered the core of our emotional world. When a relationship becomes harmful to your mental or emotional well-being, staying close out of guilt or tradition only deepens the wounds. Distance is not about punishment or revenge. It is about creating space where clarity, perspective, and healing can begin to take shape without the constant noise of manipulation, judgment, or conflict. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step back. There is a false belief in many families that no matter what happens, you should stay connected at all costs, but closeness is not always healthy. Being physically near someone who undermines your self-worth, disrespects your boundaries, or constantly triggers anxiety can be more damaging than walking away. Emotional safety should never be sacrificed in the name of loyalty. You can love someone and still recognize that being around them is hurting you. Distance gives you the chance to see things as they are, rather than how you've been conditioned to see them. When you're caught up in daily chaos or constant confrontation, it's hard to think clearly. The emotional fog keeps you from recognizing toxic cycles or acknowledging just how much pain you've been carrying. Space creates room for reflection. It allows your nervous system to calm down, your mind to clear, and your spirit to reconnect with itself. Choosing distance does not mean you are abandoning the relationship forever. It might simply be a pause, a necessary break to reset your boundaries and redefine the terms of connection. This time away is often when the real work of healing begins, when you're no longer trying to fix someone else or survive their behavior, but finally focusing on yourself. It's during this time that you learn how to trust your instincts again and rebuild the confidence that was slowly chipped away. Sometimes the people you step away from won't understand your need for space. They may accuse you of being selfish, dramatic, or unforgiving, but their reaction is not your responsibility. When someone has benefited from your silence or your compliance, your boundaries will feel like betrayal to them. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're growing, and growth often disrupts the comfort of old patterns, especially for those who relied on them. You don't have to explain your healing to anyone who refuses to acknowledge the harm. You don't owe long justifications or emotional labor to people who never made the effort to understand your pain. Your healing is sacred. It deserves protection, patience, and respect. And if that requires stepping away, going quiet, or building new emotional walls, so be it. That decision is not cold, it's necessary. Your peace must be prioritized, especially when others refuse to protect it with you. In time, distance may lead to reconciliation, or it may confirm that some relationships are meant to change or even end. Either way, healing is not passive, It's active, intentional, and often uncomfortable, but it is worth every moment of solitude and every hard boundary you set. Healing might require distance, but that distance is not the end of love. It's the beginning of self-love, which is the foundation of every healthy relationship you will ever have. You deserve peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from avoiding conflict or keeping everyone else happy while you suffer silently, but the kind that settles in your chest when you know you are living honestly and protecting your well-being. Peace is not passive. It doesn't just appear when everything around you is calm. It is something you actively create, often in the middle of chaos, by choosing yourself and honoring your truth even when it's hard. Peace begins with boundaries. It starts the moment you decide that your time, energy, and emotional safety are worth protecting. That means saying no when something feels wrong, walking away from conversations that drain you, and refusing to be manipulated by guilt or fear. Setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to putting others first, but the discomfort is temporary. The calm that follows is lasting and real. You deserve peace that does not rely on someone else's approval. Too often, we give our peace away by trying to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding us. We try to earn love, earn rest, earn kindness, but true peace does not need permission. It begins the moment you decide that your dignity and self-worth are not up for debate. It begins when you stop explaining your needs to people who never listen and start meeting them yourself. Letting go of toxic relationships is a key part of finding peace. That doesn't mean you wish those people harm or hold on to bitterness. It simply means you've accepted that some connections do more damage than good. You can love someone and still recognize that your paths need to part. You can grieve a relationship and still feel relief that it's no longer hurting you. Letting go is not failure, it's an act of courage and self-respect. You also deserve peace in your own mind. That means silencing the inner critic that echoes the harsh voices of your past. It means unlearning the belief that you are only worthy when you're useful, quiet, or agreeable. Real peace means feeling safe inside yourself, knowing that your thoughts, your voice, your dreams are valid even if no one else sees them yet. It's about replacing fear with trust and doubt with compassion. Creating peace might require big changes. You may have to disappoint others. You may have to be misunderstood, judged, or even rejected. But temporary discomfort is a small price to pay for lasting peace. The more you choose your own well-being, the more clearly you'll see who respects you, who values you, and who was only comfortable when you were silent and small. Peace reveals what's real and what never was. Above all, you deserve peace simply because you exist, not because you earned it, proved yourself, or suffered enough. You deserve peace because you are human, and humans are not meant to live in constant fear, chaos, or pain. The world may not always offer peace freely, but you can still build it for yourself, day by day, choice by choice. You deserve that kind of life, and it starts with believing that you are worth it.